Welcome. It's the last day of TC. Who had fun last night? Yes. I'm actually shocked at how many of you showed up for the first session of the day. So thank you for being here. I'm really excited to be here and to talk a little bit more about designing a corporate standard. For those of you who can't see, still in the back, this session's recorded, so you can always look at the slides later. All right, so I currently live in London, England. I've been working for Tableau there for almost 5 years, but I'm originally from Los Angeles, and growing up, I always wanted to be an artist. I came from a family of artists, so my dad was a photographer, my mom a painter, and my sister's also a painter. She's one of those annoying people that can do everything, like she picks up any kind of artistic device, and she's good at it right away. Unfortunately, I wasn't gifted with that gene. This is me to the side of my sister, the artist in the middle, trying to figure out what's going on. And I tried everything. I tried painting, I tried photography, I tried ceramics, I tried bookmaking. That's a real thing. Nothing really stuck. So it wasn't until I got to Tableau years later that I felt like I finally found my creative medium. At Tableau, I felt like I could finally express myself with something that I could actually do, which was analyze data. And now, today, the combination of design and data analytics is one of my passions. By the end of this session, I hope that you walk away feeling the same excitement that I felt the first time I found out you could drag in a floating image into a dashboard. Take it from me, you do not need to have innate artistic ability to be able to create a stunning corporate standard. Oh, software update. All right, so as you can see, I love to help people see and understand their data. And we're going to break this down into 3 parts today, so we're going to make it really easy for you to remember. The first, we're going to look at how to actually create and design your corporate standard in Tableau Desktop. And this is all about finding ways to do things more efficiently, more quickly. Next, we'll look at how to make this design repeatable. So how can we make sure that that same look and feel that we come up with in Desktop is applied throughout our organization. And finally, we'll talk about adoption. So how are our users actually consuming the corporate standard that we design? How can we make sure that the analytics that we're putting out there has an impact? So in addition to design and data analytics and sometimes art, although only as a fan, not as a producer of art, I'm also really passionate about service. And I feel really lucky that Tableau also prioritizes this. So many of you saw in the keynote on Tuesday how much more effort we're putting into service through our Tableau Foundation. And the same applies for employees of Tableau. So Tableau matches the hours that we commit to working with nonprofits, any financial donations that we give, and we're also given a day off every year where we can go and contribute to different charitable causes. What does this have to do with mustaches? How many of you know about Movember? Great. A lot of you. I'm not sure I can see any mustaches, but I can't see much from here. So for those of you that don't know, every November, hundreds of thousands of people around the world hundreds of thousands of men around the world grow a mustache. Some women, maybe, I don't know, I'm not discriminating. Grow a mustache in support of men's health. And this isn't just a kind of weird month every year where you're like, why are all these people growing mustaches? It's actually a global nonprofit, and it's where my other half, Gaz, works. Last year, Gaz was charged with figuring out how Movember did in certain campaigns and which cities they should target for the following year. Of course, entirely of his own free will, he figured that Tableau was obviously the best way to do this. And like many of you, and definitely like myself, Gaz doesn't come from a background in design. And he also actually didn't come from a background in analytics at all, so he had to start from scratch. And, I mean, he had some help, but he did have to start from scratch. And I was really proud of the very first dashboard that Gaz made. So this is the actual dashboard that Gaz put together, and this is about a campaign that Movember runs called the Moves campaign. And this one both men and women can participate in. So it's all about raising money through physical activity. So for example, if you were to run a marathon or commit to biking to work every day, that's how you would ask people to donate to the cause. And I think he did a great job with this dashboard. He's taking advantage of a lot of Tableau's defaults, a lot of visual best practice, right? We're not seeing a ton of crosstabs. And most importantly, he's answering his analytical questions, right? So he's trying to figure out, okay, which regions in the UK are doing the best? How many total miles did people move throughout the month? And then how much did they raise by age group? When I look at this dashboard, I think, well, who is this dashboard for? And what is its identity? That question is probably not important to the everyday desktop user, someone just trying to get a quick answer from their data. But I hope it's important to you, and it was definitely important to Movember, because Movember is not just a nonprofit, it's a global brand, and they rely on the recognition of their brand to bring in fundraising. So I did a little makeover of Gaz's dashboard, and this is going to be the basis of how we talk about creating our corporate standard today. So what I want you to think about is how can we take dashboards that use Tableau's defaults and perform great and take them to the next level where we're actually encouraging use and adoption. Because if we make 1,000 visualizations and no one uses them, then they won't have any impact. And what we have found is that by creating dashboards that do have this kind of corporate look and feel and encourage use, also dramatically speeds up adoption. There's 3 themes I want you to think about throughout this session. The first is the use of text. And I'm not just talking about custom fonts, although if your organization does use custom fonts, then I definitely recommend to do that. But I also want you to think about what kind of impact the text that you have in your dashboard is making. For Movember, for example, they use really bold, all capital letter fonts. They're trying to make a strong impact with their text, and they're using it to augment the numbers that they put out there. You can also think about how you use text strategically in your dashboard. So for example, in the Movember dashboard, I added a subtitle to give us a sense of direction for our dashboard. Okay, what is the purpose of it? What are we trying to accomplish? When a user comes in and looks at it, what are the kinds of questions they should be asking? The next is color. Many of you might have already heard about certain best practices when it comes to working with color in Tableau. So for example, not using too many discrete colors, or having the color blue or red mean the same thing across different dashboards. What I'm talking about when I talk about color in relation to designing a corporate standard is thinking about how our users are naturally going to identify certain colors against our brand or our organization's look and feel. So at Movember, they do have already custom colors that they use, but I also want you to think about what are people naturally going to associate with the colors you put in your dashboard. So we've all maybe seen something that has to do with politics, and no one's going to use colors other than red for Republican or blue for Democrat. In the case of Movember, we wanted to make sure that if we're talking about a monetary value, that we use green to color code that. So using colors that your users will already recognize and associate with a certain thought or value is going to reduce the time that it takes for them to absorb information from the dashboard. The last theme is consistency. And I think what's important about this theme is that we're not looking at taking one dashboard and using it as a cookie cutter to make 100 different reports from it. You want to think about creating your corporate standard, but including flexibility there for different variations. So I just did a Google search of the Movember logo, and we can see how much that logo has changed over time. But each one is giving us a sense of what this organization is and what their focus is. So right when you look at it, you know that it's a Movember icon. I have one caveat for this session, which is to never compromise efficient analytics for visual design. we're going to be talking a lot about the aesthetics of your dashboards or your reports. And I want you to think about doing all of your kind of analytic work before you go in and apply your corporate standard. So for example, in Gaz's dashboard, he had already thought about what are the business questions I need to answer before looking at the actual design elements. While there are some design elements that can actually positively impact the performance of your dashboard, you never want to do something that looks good and doesn't actually have any function or use or potentially harms your analytics. Okay, let's jump into our first element, which was designing our corporate standard. And I'm going to work under the assumption that a lot of you already know how to format in Tableau or know the basics of formatting. So this session is more about giving you the tools and processes so that you can do this more efficiently and more effectively without having to repeat a lot of steps. And I have 3 tips. You'll notice there's a lot of threes in my presentation. I have 3 tips for doing this in Tableau Desktop. The first is to begin at the end. So a common mistake that I see a lot of people do, and actually I do myself quite a lot, is that I already start to format as I'm creating my visualizations. So for example, changing the colors on the marks card, already changing my title or changing my fonts. This can be, I guess, limiting because at the end of your analytic journey, you'll end up having to repeat a lot of steps. So try and hold back and do that at the very end of your analysis. The second is to keep it simple. So we've talked about that kind of in relation to color, but this is also about the number of objects that you have on your dashboard. So try and remove anything that clutters your analysis or detracts from the message you're trying to convey. And finally, this is probably, if you had to walk away and only remember one thing, this is the one thing that you should remember, which is a tip that I have around creating and formatting your corporate standard, and that's to format highest to lowest, and we'll see in a few minutes what that means. There is one main best practice I do want to reinforce if you haven't already heard this before in Tableau, and that's the order in which Tableau likes formatting to occur. So the main way that we might format in Tableau is to use the formatting side pane, and we're going to be using this in just a few minutes. And when you make changes in the side pane, that can carry through to elements in your marks card and then in your rich text box. So this is the positive, good way that we want to format in Tableau. Doing things in the opposite direction is not always advised. And that's because if you start to edit or make changes in your rich text box, and then you go and try and apply something like a workbook level format or dashboard level format, then this won't carry through to that rich text box. So you want to make sure to go in the kind of correct order when it comes to formatting. All right, let's jump into desktop and actually see what this looks like. Okay, so we're going to start with the dashboard that Gaz originally made. And the very first thing that I like to do is, of course, drag in a floating image or icon. As I said, that was one of the favorite things that I learned originally with Tableau. If you haven't done that before, you'll find the image object in the bottom left-hand corner of your dashboard. And if I just hold down my Shift key, then I can bring it in as floating. Now, the reason that I like to first bring in a logo or an image is to give me an idea of the direction that I want to go when I'm creating the look and feel of my dashboard or my report. I have a lot of mustaches to choose from. In this case, I'm just going to choose a boring white one. And the reason that I bring this in as floating as well is due to the fact that you might not want to decide right away where this where this logo is going to go. So the design elements of the dashboard itself is one of the last things we're going to do. So I don't want to have to think about where it's going to go now and then potentially have to move items around later. So I'll just drop it kind of in the middle of my view. And as you heard already, we're going to talk about formatting highest to lowest. So what I mean by this is if we go to our format toolbar at the top of our screen, all you have to do is start at the top and work your way down. The first thing we're going to do then is format our dashboard. And here's where we have some control over the shading of our dashboard and some of the titles. So here I'll change the dashboard background to black to match the look and feel of my dashboard. Now, or of my organization, Movember. Now, you don't have to choose a color for the background of your dashboard. It's fine to leave it white, but this is just to show you an example. If you wanted to choose a custom color, a really easy way to do this is to click on More Colors and then say, pick a screen color. And that's where it comes in handy to have already dragged in your logo or a picture into your dashboard, because then you can automatically match it using Pick Screen Color. So all I would have to do is click on that, and then I can hover over anything in my dashboard and match the color. Oops. Next, we're going to look at some of the fonts. So not Tableau, Movember already has some custom fonts. And as I said, if your organization already has this, then you should definitely take advantage of it. So in this case, I'm going to change my dashboard title, make it white to stand out, and make it really big for all of you at the back, maybe a bit bigger. And also change my subtitles. So the great thing about using this side menu to change all your titles is that you can apply the same changes from one place to all of your worksheet titles. So you don't have to go in, double click on all those boxes and think about, well, did I make it size 14 or 16? Did I use bold or not? What font did I do? In one place, I can go and change all of those worksheet titles. So if I zoom back out, we can see they all now have our custom font. Next up, working highest to lowest, is formatting our workbook. And this is to control the rest of the font in our workbook, which will carry through to our individual worksheets and some of the lines in our workbook as well. So I'll just go and change my worksheet fonts to the same font that I used for my titles and make them white as well. And then I'll go ahead and remove some of these lines. So this is really a personal option for you and your organization. For Movember, I know that they like to go for a really clean look and feel. They don't want anything that looks like standard reporting. So I'm going to remove a lot of these lines just to simplify how the visualizations look. And again, doing this through this side menu means you don't have to repeat it for every single sheet. Next up on the formatting highest to lowest are these 5 options. And these become available when you're formatting out at worksheet level. I actually like to format my worksheets directly on the dashboard, because then I can see what they look like in the context of the final report. So I'll go ahead and select one of my worksheets here. And now those same 5 options are available. So if I choose shading, for example, my side menu changes, and I see those same 5 options repeated. So I have font, I have alignment, shading, borders, and lines. So again, I'll just match my worksheet background so I can have the same background repeated. And I'll change a couple of these lines. So I'm not going to make a ton of changes through the side pane. 2 things I want to kind of mention and highlight. The first is that you might notice that as I'm making these changes on the side pane, the areas that I'm changing are going bold. So this is a great way to keep track of the changes that you've made on the formatting side pane, so that you know exactly what you've already done. There's a lot of options of how to customize your worksheet from the side pane. And I know that it can be intimidating at first, but the reason that we want to try and do as much of these changes as possible in the side pane is to avoid having to do them over and over. So now that I've customized one single sheet, I want to apply this to the rest of my worksheets. And if I go ahead and unhide all of the worksheets that are on my dashboard and go to the sheet that I just formatted, I'm going to use a little trick called copy-paste formatting. As soon as I select copy formatting and I go to my next sheet over, if I right-click and say paste formatting, then Tableau is going to apply all those changes that we made on the sidebar on the original sheet to the new worksheet. And we can see exactly how that's true, right? So if I go to the sidebar of this new worksheet, those items that I changed on the original one have also gone bold. So you want to try and do as much of the customization as possible in the side menu so that you can just go ahead and copy and paste it in. Who watched Iron Viz yesterday, by the way? Cool. So actually, one of the contestants I noticed during it was using copy-paste formatting. So it actually is used by people, and it can save you a lot of time. especially when you're making something highly customized. If you haven't watched it, you should definitely go watch it. It is very cool. All right, so already our dashboard looks a lot better. The last step that you want to do from a formatting point of view is anything that has to be done on that marks card or from an individual worksheet level. So as we kind of move from highest to lowest and go with that best practice order of formatting, these are the things that you will do kind of manually or ad hoc. So the first thing that I want to adjust or customize is my map. And going into my map, I find that the way it's shaded now is a bit hard to see, so it's hard to kind of compare the different regions. I'm going to go to my marks card and change my map from a filled map to a map with shapes. And I might as well take advantage of the fact that I can use mustaches wherever I want in this dashboard. So I'm going to go and change my shape here, and I actually have some custom shapes added in of different mustaches. So now I can change my custom shape to a mustache, and then every single region, if I just make this a bit bigger, will be represented and sized by a mustache. So we can clearly see which region in the UK is doing the best or raise the most money and which one the least. We saw both in the keynote and Devs on Stage that the most exciting feature of transparent worksheets is coming out. Is everyone happy about transparent worksheets? Yes. Oh, one person raised their hand. Great. Yeah, it's tough morning after data night out. So did you know, actually, that when it came to maps, there is a trick for doing transparent worksheets before 2018.3? No was the answer to that. I have a trick for doing this, and it's really simple. If I select my map and go to Map Layers, you'll see this option here for Base Layer. If you've shaded the background of your worksheet, which we have already done through copy-paste formatting, and then simply uncheck that base layer, then our map goes transparent. So there you go. I'm not using 18.3, and I already have a transparent worksheet. You're going to make me work for it today, aren't you? Okay. So the last thing I want to do is just clean up some of the individual worksheets on the final dashboard. And this is the reason that I save a lot of this to the end, because if you're like me, you might not like a lot of clutter, like our different legends and our filters, but I keep these on until the end because then I can use them to format my worksheets from my dashboard. So for example, here I have the color legend for gender, and if I want to change that, I don't have to go to the worksheet. I can just use that color legend on the dashboard to change my view. So I know I said use colors that people recognize, and Gaz actually did that. He used pink for female and blue for male, but I think Movember could be a little bit more progressive and more unique. So I'm going to change those using my Movember color palette. So I'll just make the female coded to white and male gray, and now that's going to change the sheets that use that dimension in the view. I'll do the same with my average amount raised. So as I said, we already have that Movember color green, and again, with just a click, I can change my map, and I'll go ahead and change my bar chart as well. When I originally did the kind of makeover for Gaz, I was really into donut charts, so I've already cheated a little bit and made a donut chart in place of one of them up here, so I'll just bring that in and paste it. Now, on our bar chart of number of movers and total miles moved, we already have labeled the ends of our bars. So actually this axis here doesn't add any additional information. And this is all about the theme that we talked about of kind of keeping things simple. So you want to remove any extraneous information, things that aren't going to enhance your analytics. So I'll just go ahead and hide the header of that axis, so we don't need it there. And now I'll start to remove or change some of my objects. So I don't need my color legend for gender anymore because I've already labeled what each gender is signified as in the top left, so I'll remove that. I don't really need two versions of my color legend for average amount raised because they're the same scale and they have the same color associated with it. And finally, I have this quick filter for my ages. Now, Gaz already actually had made this dashboard interactive. So because I'm familiar with using Tableau, I know that I can click on this and filter my different ages. So I can actually get rid of this quick filter because I can just use the visualization as a filter. If you do want to keep quick filters in your view, just think about different ways you can have them fit into your corporate standard. So for example, making sure to format the filters, and then also maybe changing them from a drop-down value to from a list value to a drop-down so it takes up less room. In this case, I will get rid of that filter, but I want to include instructions for my end users, because even though I know that I can interact with that bar chart, some people will be using Tableau for the first time at Movember, and they won't know that they can actually click on it. So I'll just make a little subtitle here that says, click on an age range to filter. And I'll also add a subtitle to the title of the dashboard, like I showed before, which gives a sense of the intention of the dashboard. So I'm going to say, how did we perform in 2017? And just make this a bit smaller and change the font as well. Okay, I think we're looking pretty good. The last thing that we need to do is basically end where we started, which was with our nice little mustache. So I'm going to go ahead and decide where I want this to go. I'll just put this kind of in the top right corner of our viz. And there we go. In about 10 to 15 minutes, we were able to create our corporate standard. The last thing that I want you to think about when you are creating your corporate standard in Tableau Desktop is how your users are actually going to consume your dashboard or your reports. So we're seeing a lot of increase in terms of the number of users that are accessing reports on mobile devices. So don't forget to design for those users in mind as well. This is super easy to do with Tableau Desktop. So we have an item called Device Preview here. And if I select that and just move this over from a tablet to a phone, for example, and I add the phone layout, Tableau will automatically take that dashboard and change the width to the common width of a telephone, and then make it really long. So who knows why we make it very, very long? Scrolling, yes. So we are already conditioned to scroll for information on our mobile phones. So Tableau is recognizing that and saying that actually it would be great to just have a dashboard of a fixed width, and you can go as long as you want. It doesn't have to fit on a single page like it does on a desktop. Once it's done that, you can make some additional changes. So for example, I might take off the mustache because I don't need that, and maybe I think the map is kind of hard to see still on a mobile device, so I'll remove that as well. And if I go back to the default view, my mustache and my map are still there. So when you're creating a mobile device design, you're not removing anything from the original default dashboard. It's only what's going to appear if someone's accessing that same dashboard from a mobile device. All right, let's head back to our presentation and see where we've gotten so far. Go through that again. So we started by bringing in an image into the dashboard, and then formatting from highest to lowest by first starting with formatting our dashboard. Then we edited the rest of the text and lines by formatting the workbook through the side pane. Next, we formatted everything for the individual worksheet, and we took advantage of using copy-paste formatting to include all those changes in the rest of our worksheets on the dashboard. We made individual changes to worksheets through the marks card, and we brought it all together by adding interactivity and cleaning up the items on our dashboard. Finally, we thought about how to design for mobile use. Okay, so now that we've created our standard in desktop, let's think about how we can save time in the future by making this repeatable. So this is really important for a few reasons. One, you might not be the only person at your organization that's creating new reports on desktop. Even if you are, I think that this will help you save time. But it's also for those cases where other people are creating content and you want them to follow what you've done. And I hear a lot of times people asking about Tableau and templating. But I want you to think about this section as how we create a style guide rather than a template. Because if we think back to the consistency theme, we don't want to make this cookie cutter template. We want to have a sense of how can I apply the stylistic elements that you've designed, but in my own way. So there's 3 things to think about when you're creating your style guide. The first is color. So we already saw when I was creating the Movember dashboard that we had custom color palettes for when we're using dimensions and also for when we're using measures or continuous fields. To do this, you can find all this information online. I don't expect you to see that from the back of the room. But essentially, you want to make sure that you're adding these custom colors to your Tableau workbook so that they can be reused. Next is using font. So we used custom fonts for Movember. And something I wanted to draw your attention to is that if you're also a customer of Tableau Server, you need to make sure that the fonts that you're using, if they're custom, are also installed on your Tableau server.
Does that apply to online also? Does that apply to Tableau online?
So the question is, does that apply to Tableau Online as well? And it does not, because you cannot install custom fonts on the Tableau Online machine.
Some browsers don't support the custom fonts. Browsers don't support all the custom fonts. How to do it?
So the question is browsers that don't support custom fonts. This is a contentious topic, I know. So if you're using custom fonts in an internal organization, most of your client machines will also be having the same custom font that your organization has. So when a visualization is being rendered on the Tableau server, we have 2 options to render it. One is client-side rendering and one is server-side rendering. Client-side rendering is to basically take advantage of the machine that someone's looking at the visualization on, and for the best resourcing, we'll try and take advantage of that. In that case, you need the custom font on the client machine as well. If you choose to force Tableau to always use server-side rendering, then you need the font only on the server machine. But I'm happy to stay behind and we can talk about it more. Great. Who knew fonts could be so crazy? Great, so the last piece of the style guide is kind of putting all the elements that we came up with or put together in the first part of the presentation and making it repeatable for other users. And I think the easiest way to do this is to start with a dashboard that you've already created. So I'm going to start with the Moves Overview dashboard, and I'm just going to, this looks crazy, okay. I'm just going to duplicate it. So all I have to do is right-click on this dashboard and duplicate it, and that's because I don't want to make any changes to the original one. And then you start to put placeholders for information, for future information. So here I can just say that the dashboard title goes here and subtitle here. Now, when you're thinking about placeholders for visualizations, what you want to use for that are these horizontal and vertical layout containers. You don't want to use a blank space. And the reason for that is that a layout container allows you to drop a new visualization or sheet directly into it. And so you can kind of have a placeholder for where the worksheet is going to go in the future, and another user can simply drag and drop into that placeholder. So I'll drag in one of my layout containers next to my map, and I'll just add a border because otherwise another user won't actually know that this container is here, and remove my map. So you would repeat this for the rest of your dashboard, and what you might get to in the end is something that looks a bit like this. So here I have placeholders, and you want to think about other items like if you do have legends or KPIs or quick filters, where are those going to go on the dashboard as well. And you can make as many versions of these as you want. So you don't have to have everyone kind of fixed to a single style of report. Obviously, you may have reports with more worksheets than just 3 and other objects as well. But what's great about this is that if I came in and created a new visualization, all I would have to do is kind of drag and drop this, and it would go right into the box where it belongs. There are a few other elements that I think you should include as part of your style guide. The first, and it sounds really simple, but a lot of people miss this, instructions. So you might not be there to actually tell someone how to use your style guide, and they might not have had the pleasure of coming to this session. So make sure you're including instructions so that people know actually how to use your style guide. Next, you'll want to include different templates for your actual dashboards. And these don't have to be dashboards of multiple visualizations, right? You could just have a single visualization template. And if we are starting to use 2018.3 and we do have access to transparent worksheets, I think this is a great opportunity to take advantage of being able to do something like watermarking. So a great way of gaining trust from your users and getting them to recognize that this is part of a brand or corporate standard is to provide watermarking for your visualizations. So actually placing a logo or image behind your analytics. To do this, again, I'm going to drag in a floating image, which I love. And I'll just select a different Movember logo and make it a bit bigger. And to get this to go behind my scatter plot, all I have to do is say that I want to send this to the back of my visualization. And now I have a visualization on top that's still fully interactive with the Movember logo behind it. In your style guide, other elements that you can include are optional images. So let's say you want to include other logos that people can use or other images that would be approved for your corporate standard. And then you might go so far as to actually create templates or example worksheets for the main visualization types. So in this workbook, I've actually created some samples of, for example, what a map should look like, horizontal bars, vertical bars. And the reason for this is that they can then take advantage of that copy-paste formatting trick that we saw before. So if a new user comes in and makes a vertical bar or a tree map, for example, they could have their new workbook on one side and this style guide on the other. And all they would have to do is copy and paste the formatting from one workbook to another. So you don't have to copy the sheet from one workbook to another. The formatting copy-paste still works in between workbooks. And once they've done that, they could go in and also copy and paste this entire report template into their new workbook and then drag their sheets in. So creating these kind of sample visualizations is a great way to get others to follow your style guide. And you don't need to use a full data set to do this. You could just use a sample or dummy data. OK. So we've seen how to create our corporate standard in desktop. We've seen how to make this repeatable. The final element is how to make sure that people are actually using this. So how can we encourage adoption? And I'm going to talk about the three main methods of kind of providing visualizations or analytics to your end users. The first is if you're using the native Tableau Server interface. The second would be if you're actually taking your visualizations that you've published to either Tableau Server or Tableau Online and embedding them in a portal, whether that's internal or external. And finally, if you're taking those and actually embedding them in any third-party application. When we're using our native Tableau Server interface, you want to think about how to best organize your content for your different users. So in the case of Movember, I've come up with kind of three main groups of users. The first would be those people who are just kind of consuming our reports. So they might just be looking at something that someone's already made, using those filters, interacting with it, but they're not asking any new questions of the data. They're not building any new visualizations. The second kind of user would be our administrator. So someone who is responsible for making sure that all of our visualizations and our reports adhere to the corporate standard. And finally, are those users who actually are enabled to create new content, whether that's on desktop or directly in the server interface through web edit. Now, just because you're using the native interface doesn't mean that you're not able to add branding to the Tableau server. So using TSM Customize, you're able to do things like change the name of the server, add logos. You can also change the sign-in logo from the front page so that when a user comes in, they know that they're already accessing kind of Movember approved content. Let's have a look at what this could actually look like. So I'm going to jump into, okay, close your eyes for 1 second. We're going to get to this later. Okay, I'm going to jump into my Movember server, and here you can see that the sign-in logo is already changed. So again, I'm not seeing Tableau anywhere here, and I just have to log in. On Tuesday when I did this session, I said my password out loud, so I've already changed it since then. But always keep your password secure. No, don't save. Okay, so as soon as I'm into my site, I'm an administrator on the Movember site, so I can see all 3 of those projects that I mentioned. In the analysis project, as I said, if I were an end user, this is where I would go to be able to see and consume different reports or analysis. Next to that, I have what I call the sandbox environment. That is where my various users would go and publish their new content. And as an administrator, I can go in and make sure that this is actually adhering to our corporate standards. So let's take a look at this dashboard. So this is looking at how the campaign performed against targets, so not just how much money they raised, but was it against what they expected. And since you're all trained now, what can we see that Gaz missed on this dashboard? Font, color, logo, everything, so he did it all wrong. So let's let Gaz know what he needs to change before I can kind of approve this content as the administrator. So here what I'm going to do is write a comment on this dashboard, and I'm going to tag Gaz so that he actually gets a notification of what we're saying. And I'll say, hey Gaz, people at TC think you need to do this all over again, aka logos, colors, etc. And what I could do is then include a snapshot of the dashboard. And as soon as I hit post, Gaz will then get a notification in his email inbox of what he needs to change on this dashboard. And then he can come in, make those changes. And let's say he's done that because he's like super fast and now the dashboard looks great. What I could do as the administrator is take this content and say, now that it fits our corporate standard, I want to move it from that sandbox environment to our production environment. So that's how you can ensure that all your end users are accessing consistent reports that follow your standard. Finally, we have an area that's reserved for that style guide. This is for users to either be able to download to their local machine to be able to use the style guide with Tableau Desktop, but it's also for those users that are able to actually create new content on the web, because we still want those users to be able to follow our corporate standard. And this makes it really easy. So as a person that's enabled to create new content through the web browser, all I would have to do is click on our template or our style guide and hit edit. And then within the edit mode on the server, they could connect to additional data, build new visualizations, and then all you'd have to do is kind of drag and drop that into the template as we've already seen happen before. So I can drag in a bar chart, I can remove that kind of text placeholder, and maybe a pie chart as well. And then as soon as they're done with that, they could go and hit Save As to save this as a new report on the dashboard. So I wouldn't recommend giving save capability to those users because then they could overwrite your template. Okay, another way that we can provide content to our users is by actually taking one of these visualizations that we've embedded in the server and bringing it to a place where employees in our organization are already going to get other information. By bringing analytics to our end users, we're more likely to see them actually adopt the use of Tableau. So I've made an example of a Movember employee portal. So here's Gaz's page, and he can see different posts. He can make a status, so outgrowing a mustache is going to take a while for November. And then he sees his upcoming meetings, friend requests. So there's a friend request from Rafi, and he might just decline that because he's like, she doesn't even work here. She works at Tableau. And he also has a section here called Analytics. And by clicking on that section, Gaz will be able to see his Movember reports that he created directly in his portal rather than having to go out and go to Tableau Server separately. So here he sees that overview dashboard that we made. It's still fully interactive. You can see the tooltips. He can navigate to other dashboards that he's made, and he can also perform some actions directly in the portal. So he can do something like export this as an image or a PDF. So the technology that we're using to enable this is the JavaScript API through Tableau. And if you've now learned that I'm bad at art or being an artist, you can be guaranteed that I definitely do not have any innate coding abilities or anything of that sort. So you definitely don't have to feel intimidated to be able to start using this in Tableau. And the one skill that you really need to learn when you start coding is copy-paste. That's pretty much what I learned is all you need to do. They make it like, oh, it's so complicated and you need to go to school for it. No, you just need to copy-paste. So on Tableau's website, if you just search for Tableau and JavaScript API, you'll come to this page where they tell you the 4 main elements that you need. So obviously you need the URL of the visualization you want. You need to put that kind of in a container, and then you need to say how you want the page to load that visualization. And they also have this section here that says to view the full code sample, see basic embed. This is where the copy-paste comes in. So if I click on basic embed, then I see an example here using Tableau Public and the sample code. So I'm actually going to take a risk and do this live with you all now, so you can see that it's not that difficult, hopefully. And let's do one a bit more fun. So let's do the export to PDF button. So here we see the same visualization, and then below it, you have an export button, and then the code. So let me just make this dual screen. And I have already an HTML document that just has a title, and I'll prove to you that this is real. So we can say, make this TC Thursday. And if I hit save and then refresh this page, my title's updating, so this is real, live. And I'm going to go to the export to PDF page and just copy the code. So everything kind of that starts at script, because I've already put in my own title here, down to this point. And I'll just hit Control-C, go back, and paste this into my page. And now there's just 2 things that I need to change. The first is pointing to the right JavaScript file on your server. So here, instead of public.tableau.com, I'm just going to change this to my local server. And then the second thing I need to change is the URL of the visualization. So here we see that Tableau public URL, so I'll just delete that and replace it with one of our Movember vizzes. Now I'll hit save, and this is the moment of truth. If I hit refresh, okay, so we see our export button. Wait for it. And there's our visualization. It's as easy as that. So this is interactive, right? I can still click on the bars, and I have that lovely export button that goes and enables me to generate a snapshot of the dashboard. Okay, so let's break down actually what we needed to be able to do that. So as we saw on the portal, this is where someone's going to get information. And the important element here is that when you're using this methodology, you still have to have your users enabled to access Tableau Server, right? So when I went in and embedded the visualization in analytics, we already have Gaz as an approved user authenticated to Tableau Server. So again, if anyone wants to stay and talk about that afterwards, we can talk about the different methods for that, but I wanted to make it clear that this isn't a way to just put Tableau Server in front of everyone. They still need to be a user on the server. So everything within this box here is purely an embedded visualization. So it's just the URL of the viz on Tableau Server that we're putting into an iframe. And then everything to the right of this is controlled by the JavaScript API. So these are all just buttons that we've written with HTML, and we've said, when I click this button, I want you to talk to Tableau Server and generate a PDF or an image or download the data. And this can be used with filters as well. So it's a great way to take a method that someone might already be used to interacting with something by using a portal and having it interact with the Tableau Server instead. Okay, the third methodology was using a third-party application. And the best example I can give of this is here at Tableau. We use Salesforce.com. And if I were the account manager for Movember, I might go into my account and see, okay, well, Movember only has one desktop license for the last year. True story. Why are they not using Tableau more? And instead of having to then go and log into Tableau Server in a different window, find the right dashboard I want, log in, filter for Movember, why not bring the analytics to Salesforce.com so that our account manager can go in and they can see things like, okay, well, this one user is never going on our website, he's never watching any training videos, I wonder why that is. Obviously, it's because he's going to me to get all this information instead of going to find it himself. But this allows the salespeople at Tableau, or account managers, to make more informed decisions about their accounts, where they should focus their time. So you want to kind of bring the analytics to people's daily workflows so that it's incorporated more easily. My favorite part of the kind of makeover exercise with Movember was after I gave that original dashboard back to Gaz, he came back the very same day and had made 3 entirely new dashboards from that. And what I love is that he actually took those and made it his own, right? So he was able to incorporate those standards and apply it to 3 entirely new reports. So I want to go over how you can take what we've done and make it your own. So 2 examples I'm just going to talk about really quickly from the real world. The first is from the BBC. So the BBC, or the British Broadcasting Corporation in the UK, actually published their own style guide when it came to using Tableau visualization. So you can actually look at this online. And they highlighted 3 things that were important to them when it came to using Tableau in the BBC. And these will actually sound pretty familiar. So their first one was consistent user experience. And for them, this was about making visualizations that were quick, easy, and intuitive. The second was data visualization that communicates effectively. And for the BBC, it was important that every visualization they made had a narrative around it that was clear and concise. And finally, they said that they wanted to use a visual language that's a mark of quality. And for them, that was making sure that every visualization they published through Tableau was recognizable as part of the BBC. The second example comes from the NHS, or National Health Service, also in the UK. And the NHS also has a style guide for their reports, so they were making these kind of template reports and actually annotating them to show their end users how to adhere to them. But my favorite thing that this particular NHS trust does is that they take color coding to a whole new level. So they don't just have one color palette that everyone at the NHS has to use, they actually color code their reports. So if you're looking at a pink color palette at the NHS, then you know that you're looking at a report that's related to patient experience. If you're looking at a green one, then it's related to clinical experience. So this is a great way to, again, capitalize on your users' knowledge and start to train them on what to expect when they're looking at visualizations. Okay, let's recap what we've done and think about the 3 top things you have to remember or take away. So when we created our design in Tableau Desktop, the only thing you have to remember was format highest to lowest. Next, we looked about making this repeatable. And again, what you want to take away from this section is allowing flexibility while adhering to a certain style guide. And finally, we looked at adoption, and this is about thinking about how our users are already going to get information and how can we incorporate analytics into their daily workflow. So I have a couple of frequently asked questions. The first is, do you have an example of how this was done IRL or in real life? And we actually had a customer speaker who was speaking on this, the Hartford. I'm not sure if this session was already yesterday or later today, but all of the sessions are recorded. So I do recommend checking this out and seeing how a real customer has implemented this in Tableau. Second, I missed some stuff. How can I see this session again? So it has been recorded. All the recordings are available a week after conference. Hopefully they'll show the one where I said my password out loud, because that was a great moment. Third, most importantly, what kind of mustache will Gaz grow this year? And this is where I need your help. So I've given him 3 main options. Do I have a vote for the Tom Selleck? Yes. Okay. The ladies in the room are with me. Do I have a vote for the Henry Cavill? Very few. Okay. Jamie Foxx? All right. Oh, great. My personal vote is Tom Selleck, but I think it's hard to achieve in 30 days. In all seriousness, if you want to know more about Movember, you can also contact me about that. And finally, how can you leave feedback? So if you want to include any specific mustache puns, one I've heard before is stashboard instead of dashboard. Please do this in the survey. Otherwise, you're free, get coffee, have fun, and I'll stay after for questions. Thank you.